So again, I'm Fabi Reyna. I run She Shorts magazine. You all are probably the same crew, so hello. And I'm really, really excited to present this panel on luthiers and repair people and the experience of building guitars and repairing them and being little like guitar doctors, pretty much, which is awesome. As a kid, I always wanted to do that, and it's so daunting to me that I have a lot of questions for y'all about how to get started and the details of that life. So let's start by just introducing yourselves and how long you've been handling repairs or design for guitar.
Hello, my name is Rachel Rosenkrantz. I've been building guitars now for over 5 years. My background is in industrial design and furniture design, and I'm also a musician, and it took me a while to actually find a discipline that combined all my passions, so that's what I do now.
Nice.
Yeah. And I also teach at the Rhode Island School of Design spatial dynamics, which is a fancy name to say volume. So I do teach my students how to build instruments, also invent their own.
Awesome.
It's been really fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Chloe, I know that you're a violin repair, which is also awesome because go ahead.
So my name is Chloe. I build violins and played fiddle since I was a kid, and just in a very random happenstance met a violin maker and decided that was what I was interested in doing. But I studied with a violin maker in Vermont. I guess that was almost 10 years ago. And moved down here to the city and have worked at various repair shops around and learned a lot, just kind of trial under fire. And now own a shop with Mamie, Brooklyn Luthier, and work on primarily guitars, but anything stringed. So quite a variety.
Awesome.
And I'm Mamie Minch, and I kind of came to instrument repair by my background is in fine art and other various craft. Lots of I love like tiny titchy, fingery things. Growing up, I made a lot of jewelry and a lot of small things. And then I went to fine art school and studied printmaking, mostly serigraphy. Came to New York on like a serigraphy program in 2002, and then I fell in love with a banjo player, and then I joined a band, and then I stayed. And I was playing like this kind of early American-style Piedmont blues, sort of finger-picking blues, and I didn't really know that there was a scene in New York for it, and that's how I ended up getting involved with a bunch of musicians here. I got a job at a vintage guitar store, and was really turned on by their repair shop. I ended up working in it and did a bit like kind of an informal apprenticeship, and that's about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I worked at a couple of other shops around town, and I left, and Chloe and I opened up Brooklyn Luthier together.
Awesome. So I want to start off by talking about for a lot and really quickly, both Rochelle and Brooklyn Luthier have been in She Shorts magazine profiled as luthiers and their experience in repair, and because of that, we have a lot of our readers interested in how to get started, and a lot of our readers expressed to us that this is something that they're interested in. It's not anything that they've ever been exposed to. And so I'm curious about your experience with just kind of the first time that you heard about, that you knew that this was a career that you could follow, and when you decided, okay, I'm interested in design and I'm interested in kind of the details of building, but actually I want to be touching guitars. I want to be repairing and building guitars. So can you tell me about that experience first, Rochelle?
So actually the first time was when I was 21 back home in Paris. I used to live 2 blocks away from the Atelier Dupont, who are known for their gypsy jazz guitar. So on my way to catch the bus to go to school, I was walking by their shop like every day and saw the progress. And And one summer I was asking if there would be like an apprenticeship or maybe a summer like internship, and told me that I was too old. So basically the logic was why somebody in a good art school, 21, will take the spot of somebody that's 14 that might not make it to high school. That was more of a kind of a, don't take the spot of more of vocational kind of education pathway. And art school started to be too busy, and I didn't have time to play music, and I kind of forgot about the idea. And about like 8 to 9 years later, I started to play music again, and that all came right back. And when that came right back, I was also tired of just working on the computer and not working with my hands anymore. I was doing designing for Philips Electronics for all their lighting. And I just decided, I found a luthier near Newport, so a half hour from where I live. I live in Providence. That's said, yeah, I'll give you an old school apprenticeship. I started to ask my boss at the time if I could work part-time to start my apprenticeship part-time and to transition the careers. And within 3 months, I just quit my job. And I knew that was just, it was an epiphany. I'm like, this is it. It just like.
And when was that?
That was 5 years ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And it was. I got lucky. The man who trained me, his name is Daniel Collins. He makes mostly classical guitars, and it was perfect timing because he just started a guitar making school. We were only 5 at the time, so I was literally there every day, like 9-10 hours a day for like a really deep dive, which was a good time to do that. Now he has 35 students, so the schedule is you can't like go there.
So you went to his school?
Just before he started it.
Got it.
So I was able to have a really pretty much a one-on-one old school apprenticeship. So I feel very fortunate that not only I found somebody, but I could do it this way.
And what was the first guitar that you worked on?
Classical, a Hauser style.
Oh, nice.
If I make one that's very difficult with slotted head, it's like one that's very complicated, then the rest should be a walk in the park, in theory.
Yeah. Awesome. And what about you, Chloe?
I had a very similar experience, actually, to Rachel. I was going to school for human ecology in Maine. I was into marine biology and scuba diving, and I was on just a completely different path. And one day I was eating my lunch on the pier, and this guy was rowing out to his sailboat, and the boat looked a lot like one that I grew up on and or around, and so I asked if I could go check it out. He rowed me out there, and his friend was building a violin on the boat. So very unexpected, but like I said, I'd played violin since I was a kid, just classically trained, but had given it up during my angsty teen years, and hadn't even really thought about violin for years at that point. But it was kind of an epiphany moment. I was like, wow, this is so portable, and the tools are so small, and you could sail down the coast of Maine and build a violin. And it just all seemed very approachable and romantic.
And so what did you do?
So I was in my second year of college, and but let's see, the school I was going to was very accommodating. Like it's kind of build your own curriculum, and so I realized I could, get credit potentially by apprenticing with a violin maker. Finding that person to study under was the difficult part. So I had a directory of North American violin makers, and I just called every single one.
Wow.
And they all were rather discouraging, I would say. I guess the expectation is that you would go to Cremona and go to a formal school and study. There weren't many people who were interested in taking on an apprentice in that old school kind of way. But one was, and it was this guy Thurmond Knight up in rural Vermont. So I went up there and lived, in cold rural Vermont and chopped firewood and shoveled snow out of his driveway in exchange for,
All for the violins.
yeah.
That's awesome.
The question was, how did we get involved in it, or was there like a moment?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
your first moment that you were like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, so I kind of flirted with it for a while. It kind of was sneaky. I always have liked taking things apart and putting them back together, and I've always liked old guitars and like old things. And the way that things from the 20s smell, it's different than the way that things from the 30s smell and the 40s smell, you know. I was really into 20s smells. Old clothes, old machines, moving parts. And my dad was a guitar person and a builder person, boat builder and a house builder and things. So there were always tools around, and I was interested in working with wood and made things. And then I actually think that the first time I fixed a guitar, when it was like, oh, this is a thing that I could do and I could be good at doing this, was when I was a teenager, I had a Kalamazoo guitar. It was a guitar
cool.
that was made by, I still have it actually, I have a
That's
couple now.
awesome.
They were made by Gibson, and they were one of their cheaper lines, so they were made in the Gibson factory with Gibson materials, but just they cut some corners, you know. And I had this really great little guitar, and it was like it was like a little time capsule kind of. It was built in the mid-30s, and then in the 60s, someone said, I know what I'll do. I'll strip it and refinish it, and I'll refinish it with like a rattle can, spray paint, you know, and then I'm just gonna like dunk the whole thing into a bucket of finish. It was like really kind of screwed up, and so it cost me $100, and I loved it. And I was a teenager, and I was geeking out on John Fahey stuff a lot, and so you had to really kind of sit and get involved. And I fell asleep with my guitar in my bed, and I had a lofted bed, and I had this dream, one of those big dreams where you're ballroom dancing and you're doing a lot of movement, and I kind of went like pa-chong, and I kicked one leg out, and I kicked the guitar out of the bed, and I ejected this guitar, and it landed, and I woke up to like you know, that plucked string noise. And I was horrified, and but I was kind of lucky because I just got one big long rib crack, and I went like, oh, I kind of like pushed the two sides together, and I saw how they fit, and it was this perfect puzzle, and I glued it and clamped it, and it worked.
Nice.
And I went like, oh, one could do this.
Right.
But then it took me a little while to figure out how to make money at it.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm still figuring that out.
So did you then seek out an apprenticeship or mentorship like Chloe and Rochelle, or did you start doing this experimenting on your own?
So a little bit of both. I was in my early 20s, and I was trying a lot of things, and I was an active performer, and waitressing for cash, and playing music, and playing in bands, and traveling. And I kind of just found myself getting a little bit closer to the world of vintage guitars, and I bought a national guitar from the 30s from this shop that I got a close relationship with, and they ended up hiring me there. And I started on the sales floor, and I ended up in the repair shop, and I ended up as head of repair before I left, and we did our thing. So it's fairly organic. It wasn't the only thing that I was interested in, but it turned out to be the best fit for me of the things that I was doing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you both, Mamie and Chloe, about, I think it's really interesting that you all started Brooklyn Lutherie, and one of you is a violin repair and interested in violin, and maybe you are focused on guitar. So how do those two interests play into each other? How do you is it kind of thing where like if you're stuck, maybe like a little bit of violin knowledge helps the other, or can you give me like kind of some insight into that?
That's actually pretty interesting. That's one of those microcosmic things where a diverse brain pool helps everyone, which is kind of one of the points I want to make about women in Lutherie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, more perspectives you have working on a single sort of like thing, the better off everyone is.
Right.
So I think, I might be so bold as to say that collaboration is like a really special part of our shop.
Definitely.
Not just I'm stuck, can you help me, but the kind of tools we're both attracted to getting into the shop, the sort of particular materials knowledge we both have, the hand skills that we both have that are a little bit different. Do you have anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. Maybe specifically, like I work with hide glue, which is just very traditional and old school, and a lot of people have moved on to other glues, but there are definitely moments where, my knowledge of that material comes in really handy. Little things like that. Yeah.
So finishing things, different kinds of finish solutions that Chloe learned with violins that,
Right.
We work with. Like the guitars that we see are from every time and place. We see 100-year-old instruments, we see 5-year-old instruments. They're really cheap, they're super high-end, they're across the board. It's actually important to us to service all different kinds of players and, price points.
Right.
But, Chloe knows a lot of different things about finish that are different than the things that I know about finish. So,
Yeah.
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I when I think about repair or lutherie at all, I don't think of collaboration. So
It's true. A lot of
Yeah.
people, you're alone in a room with your, I don't know if this is
Right.
your experience.
I do have my own space now, but I used to share shops, and it's so true. I've learned a lot from sharing space with other makers, and I use that knowledge all the time. Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Providence, but down here in New York, there's a cool Luthier community, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing that happens that is just very free-flowing and a lot different from the violin making world, which is very secretive. So that's been cool just to, meet the other local builders and, meet for drinks and just kind of talk shop and just learn new things.
And even though, like in Providence, we are very much also like loners, but we do help out each other. When I was in a pinch of a space, when I was going through my divorce, I had a couple Luthiers that said, "Hey, if you need a space, I heard you look for one. Just come to our shop for a couple months for the time you find your space," and that was super helpful. So yeah, no, that and I was. There's more solidarity that I found when I was mass producing reflector lamps at Philips. I'm like, yes, this is more humane.
Yeah, and I want to touch on community and kind of industry and all of that in a little while. But while we're on the topic of collaboration and kind of and that idea, Rochelle, you began as a designer, so I want to get your insight into design and guitars and designing your own guitars and what kind of headspace you need to be in and what you do to prepare for that.
So a couple of things. As a design, having a design background, it was very funny to me to see how much Luthiers go by the blueprint and the way things are supposed to be, which is the opposite of my training in design was. So I found myself at first kind of, okay, I'm learning something, but I'm doing something very traditional. Does it have to be this way? Is it just, can we just like...
Experiment?
Yeah, a little bit more like question the assumptions sometime. And so I found like that forced me to be more experimenting a bit more. And also we're in a time where I'm thinking, oh, I miss that CNC machine I used to use. Or what if I got all my jigs like vector perfect? And then I will have less room for mistakes when I build them by hand. So there's also like all that design mentality that I had from production before that I start to like bring more in my Luthier. It doesn't have to be the way it always was.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing models where I make multiple of the same. I do one of a kind, so it's per order. So also it's tailored so the design fits the customer, like what's their habits, what style of music they're playing, what kind of sound they try to achieve, and what kind of wood should I use for that. So there's more of a troubleshooting and more of it's being like a little detective of what should. It's fun. It's
Yeah. And speaking of wood, what would you say is the most important component of your designs? Is it the wood? Is it the glue or the tools, or what is?
It's a combination of everything. It's the shape combined with maybe also the type of bracing you have structured inside that can give you a different type of like tone. Like you can have something a bit more bassy based on how you're gonna brace it. But combined with a certain type of wood, you can even get it more rounded. And if you give it even more volume, like cubic volume,
Right.
you get. It's just so layered that all the combinations are
Yeah.
really. It's an infinity of like. It's great.
Okay.
You can really like make the ideal guitar
Right.
for each person, and it will be a different guitar every time.
Yeah, and I just got really excited about this. So I think one of the, as you're talking about that, I'm like, oh my God, that seems like so much to take in. But then I really want to know about the mistakes that you made, just leading up to being like, oh, I figured it out. You know, so how many mistakes, or can you think of like the biggest mistake that you made while in the process of being like, okay, what is this even? How do you build this? How do you get this sound? Can you talk a little bit about that?
At the end of the day, it's only wood, so it's okay.
True.
We have a friend who says it's not like you're operating on a baby's eye. Like, it's someone's toy. You know what I mean? From the perspective of repair, it is. It's reversible. You can basically fix anything.
Right.
Yeah.
There were mistakes I made building my first and second violins that just threw me in this new trajectory of, oh, now I have to learn how to do a scroll graft or do a more complex restoration process because I messed up. But now I know how to fix that. Yeah, and it is just wood.
I love how repair is like, you have to reverse engineer. And I've learned so much by just opening an instrument and see how other luthiers before me fixed it. And I never thought of that. That's smart. And just like, all right, so now it's something I'm reusing. And I don't know who did that, but it's just that I've learned from opening that mandolin that I could fix a neck this way. I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah. We always wish that older guitars would have like a library card. That someone would enter what they did.
Some of them do.
Yeah.
Pencil, yeah.
Oh, cool.
You do occasionally get little notes from people on the inside.
That's awesome. Maybe actually I want to ask you, you said that your dad was a builder and and you grew up sort of watching him build. What were some of the questions that you initially asked when you became interested in that type of work?
Yeah, that's interesting. So my dad is a wooden boat builder and also a house builder. And he started building guitars 5 years ago.
Cool.
After I got into working on
That's
guitars.
awesome.
Pretty interesting, right?
So what did he ask you?
Well, so now he emails me like every day with it's really funny the way that things progress as you become an adult. And no, I'm actually glad for it because it gives us something to talk about, and it means he's taking me seriously. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
So he was always, there was always a project going on. Basically, I wasn't scared of power tools. I was totally comfortable. I made my first dovetail when I was 7, working with tools, and I was comfortable sharp things, and shop safety wasn't freaky to me, I felt quite comfortable. And I still like just mucking about and making a thing, anything. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, is that pretty good?
Yeah, that's
okay.
your experience. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, Chloe, did you have any initial questions that, when you saw that violin maker there, what did you first ask?
Well, how to sharpen a blade, I think, was my first question. Yeah, I don't know.
Because what I'm thinking is that, in my mind, my first question is, what tools do I need?
Yeah.
What tools do I even need to start?
Yeah.
If I enter a shop, and I want to build a guitar, what do I need?
A saw, a chisel.
Hand plane.
Oh yes, number 4 in brass, so it's heavy. Gravity does the work, not just your arm.
Yeah.
A square. Sandpaper. That's 5.
And were these things sort of presented to you, or did you have to find them?
I was given a list, like when I started my apprenticeship, of things to buy or find, and just being my frugal self, I found a lot of them used at the Liberty Tool Barn in Maine.
Nice.
Anyone's ever been there? Yeah, and then that was the very first part, was just familiarizing with the tools, learning how to sharpen them for days. Sharpening. And then familiarizing with the different woods and how you cut a tree down and, mill it and dry it. And so all of that stuff.
Yeah. And Rochelle, for you, I mean, you went to a school. And so what was their process like of teaching, like, the steps?
Well, it was just before it became a school.
Okay.
So it was, but all the tools were shared. So Daniel was teaching with Ryan. So half the students were for furniture making and half the students were for guitar making. So I think we were 5 students at a time. So we're two students making guitars and not 3 now. But all the tools were shared, so I didn't need to shop for anything for the first year. Then I started to slowly get my own hand tools. Then that shop was a bit far, so I moved closer to Providence, and I shared the space with Otto D'Ambrosio. And it was just when he was about to move to LA, where his new shop is now. So basically, I was able to buy half his shop and half of all his wood. So I was able to pretty much have a turnkey shop for half the cost.
Yeah.
So, and he takes care of his equipment really well. So that was perfect timing. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's how I was able to acquire most of my tools, at least for machinery and yeah.
And so for repair, in Brooklyn Lutherie, has there been any specific project that you're like, this seems impossible? Like, this is completely destroyed.
Quite often.
So more often than one would think.
This is completely destroyed. Well, that's maybe not where my brain went first when you said this seems impossible, but sometimes things are completely destroyed. And well, yeah, actually, on that thought, learning how to say, like, no way has been something that's been really personally challenging and interesting. Learning how to just say absolutely not to people. Like, I know you would like to offer me a lot of money to try to do that, but it's a fool's errand, that kind of thing. Or just learning how to choose what your battles are. But is there anything that we thought was impossible that we pulled off with panache? I think that must be true. I mean, right now we're working on a bandura that was smuggled out of Nazi-occupied Ukraine during World War II by our client's father. And he's involved in the Ukrainian community in the Lower East Side, just old school Ukrainian community. And it's like really, it's just like the headstock's broken off 3 different times and been glued with who knows what kind of glue, It's a lot of very, small scale, thoughtful, slow, long-term repair. We have to try and reverse engineer what kind of strings would have been on it when it was built, how much tension can it take. It has 2 sound posts and a big, long, weird milled brass tailpiece, like just a lot of weird stuff. So, that, and also working on day-to-day things for working musicians, and a Moroccan centre is in right now, with like a broomstick neck that we had to figure out how to do tuning pegs for. There's always something. It's a real perk and an interesting thing about our job is that you couldn't predict what's about to come in the door.
Right. Do you find that making it into career is the kind of thing where you kind of have to say yes at the beginning to as many projects as possible, or how do you? What was your experience in sort of continuing to build these relationships and essentially into a career? Maybe starting with you, Rochelle.
Can you just repeat the last part?
Yeah. So in your experience, how to turn this from a hobby into
I
a
said,
career?
yeah, I said yes to everything at first. And then little by little, I started to see what I really wanted to do, what was worth of my time. And I finally kind of started to learn how to say no in the last year. But as a career, I made the choice fairly soon. Once you have your mind aiming at a target, then it's pretty obvious what's a yes or a no, and what should come to the shop or not. Yeah.
Gotcha. What about Chloe?
Yeah, starting the business, we didn't turn anything away, really, and, sold ourselves really cheaply just to get experience. But now it's, I kind of take jobs that are things that I would like to learn, and maybe I profess that I've done it before, really haven't.
I know all that, yes.
But yeah, no, it's all just about experience and learning, and maybe you're not going to get paid for all the time you put into a particular job, of course, but you'll come out on top, just knowledge-wise.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's been pretty interesting to kind of understand where to draw the boundaries, and I feel like that's been a big process, a big part of turning it into something that's lucrative. Okay, we don't do that. We don't do rebinds on old arch tops,
Right.
because they're full of gas that's bad for you, and then they take more time than I can really charge for, so, and you don't know that until you kind of try.
Right.
But then you have to find someone who does, who you can refer people to, because you don't want to be a jerk. That's the other part.
It's I guess it's interesting to me because being a luthier is an old practice. And so how much of that do you take as you begin your career into becoming your own repair person or luthier? How much of the old school traditional route of how things were done before is passed on to how y'all do things?
I don't know, like when you use mostly like hand tools, it's pretty much the same as like if somebody had a time travel machine and showed up from 200 years ago in your shop, they can start working.
Yeah.
They'll just be amazed by like a spindle sander.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Adhesive sandpaper.
Oh yes.
Revolutionary. I actually was taught to burnish wood with horsetail, the plant. But back in Stradivari and Amati's time, they were burnishing wood with like a boar's tooth or shark skin. So abrasives have come a long way. Glue has come a long way. We use cyanoacrylate, super glue a lot. It's made for dental work, so it's great for doing stuff on bone.
Yeah.
Cool.
Epoxy.
Yeah, you're right. Glues have come a long way. And then even like using a CNC machine, there are ways to use modern technology that really make our lives easier.
Yeah.
Sounds like glue is a big part of this process.
Yes, ma'am.
And truss rods.
Truss rods.
Oh.
Right. Yeah.
And so my last question before I end on sort of the industry and community is, do you have like a routine that you try and follow, that you're like, okay, I get there in the morning, I blah 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 blah, or is it kind of different every day? Let's start with Chloe.
Yeah, okay. It's definitely different every day. There's the continuity of caffeination and stretching. Yeah, a lot of, it's different every day, but it's cool having just like a plethora of work stockpiled up waiting to be done. I can kind of choose depending on my state of mind. Like, I'm not ready to do this crazy electronics mod right now, so I'll just do a setup. So I kind of can pick and choose and have a little variety. And yeah, taking time in between jobs to like stare off into space and stretch.
Nice.
That's a good one. Yeah, you got to take that extra moment. Yeah, same here. But I find the sooner, like, we get to the shop and then you have to listen to the phone messages and then you have to answer the emails. And that's my least favorite part, even though I really like our clients. Like, I like our client base. Our client base is cool. But, you know, that stuff, I find the sooner I can get to my bench and start working, just the better the day goes. Like, if I set a tone. And then I feel like I have about 5 hours of good creative handwork in me every day. And that's about what I have. Anything after that, I might be like, ooh, kind of dragging a little bit. But
Cool. Rochelle?
So I mostly do building more than repair. So I always try to have 3 instruments I work on at the same time. So while the glue dries, I can work on the varnish here, or I can do some inlaying cuts for another one. So there's a lot of waiting. There's some steps you can't rush. So, but other than that, it's get up in the morning, roll out of bed, start working because I live and work in the same space.
Right.
And I start around 8 and I do my thing and I stop around 4. And that's it. But every day is different, even though I start and stop at the same time. I don't do the same thing every day because the projects are rotating.
Gotcha. And so, community-wise, we have to wrap this up pretty soon. But community-wise, how has, I guess to start that whole thing, you all recently interviewed Linda Manzer, who is like amazing, and she's one of the most well-known women in Luthier. So, what do you find a lot of women in this career path, in this industry? And when you do, is it something that is like kind of an immediate connection?
Yeah.
And what has the industry, how does the industry treat women in this career?
You want to start? No. Okay. So it's not. It's rare to run into women doing that, but we are out there. When I went to Woodstock in October, where there's the lutherie showcase, there were about 200 people, luthiers, showing work. I think there was 3 women represented: Linda Menzer, Peggy White, and Megan.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was it. But that's more than usual, so it starts.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see actually how many women are actually really doing it, even though it's not visible on festivals and things like that, thanks to Instagram. And there's actually way more of us out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that's I'm just gonna say this real quick, but when I was looking, I'm constantly researching for builders and luthiers, and I'm always saying that, okay, we know that musicians exist and that we're out there every day surrounded by women who are playing music, but luthiers and builders, they're not in the spotlight. There's not very much visibility for women and building and lutherie. So when I found out how many women there are in kind of the behind the scenes of building, it blew my mind. And I was like, okay, this is what I need to focus on now, because it's huge actually. And a lot of people think that it's not. But
well, what you're doing is huge.
Yeah.
Helping us to be more visible. It's fabulous. Yeah. Yeah, right. It is one of those careers where you're behind the scenes, right? You know, and if you do a really good job, no one knows you were ever there.
Totally.
You know? So right. So that's something that people are up against. This field also needs more women. We need more POC. We need more queer people. It's like I was talking about, like the broader the brain pool, the more strengths that you have, the stronger the whole community is. Yeah, and it's in some ways I think that the old guard needs to hear that.
Yeah. Is it something that I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the luthiers in the community are primarily men who have been doing this for decades or years. Are they supportive to the work that you're doing, or do you get a lot of just kind of feedback saying, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing this, or things like that?
Who wants to take this
From my
one
experience, I
first?
think it's more generational.
Right.
Okay.
Like men under 50, totally supportive. Men over 50, it sounds like a cliche, and I hate cliche, but it's more like that's not the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Right.
I think it's more of a generational thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
My experience has been just completely positive and supportive, honestly, from, the older Luthiers out there. So I don't know. It's,
and I think that they both exist. I think that
Totally.
definitely both experiences exist. And so I think it's awesome that you guys are getting really good feedback. And when we interviewed you a couple years ago, you were saying that the community here is kind of like, yes, keep doing what you do, especially because you might be one of the only shops run by women, one of the only repair shops run by women in this side of the country. So, and I'm sure one of, probably just a handful in the entire nation, so. But cool. Do you all have any questions out there? No?
I have a few thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them is just to follow up on the gender question, because in putting the series together a few years ago, I was lucky, and one of the first people who came to talk was Ola Strandberg, and he was approaching some of the design problems and from the point of view of the conservatism within actually the electric guitar community. A lot of players didn't like guitars without headstocks on them. And so, even though he started initially trying to just build a few guitars for himself and ultimately scaled up into launching a company, when he started deploying the guitars out into the community, only people who were players like Tosin Abasi, who were really interested in completely challenging the envelope of the instrument, were okay with the idea that the guitar didn't have a headstock. And if you read the forums in responding to Ola's guitars, and if anyone here doesn't know his guitars, they're guitars that don't have headstocks. They're ergonomically designed. They have trapezoidal neck profiles, stuff like that. So they're pretty unusual, but they're not that unusual, really. But the reaction that many people in the forums had to these instruments was like, oh, that's cool, but I'd never play that. I mean, I look stupid playing a guitar without a headstock. And there's also, as you all know, an unbelievable sexism that's undergirding the entire community. The way that guys geek out about new guitars, there's such an unbelievable sexualization of the instruments themselves.
Yeah.
And it's really twisted too. It's folded back on itself in so many perverse ways.
Yeah, it's weird.
And yet there's such a conservatism. And yet it has to be exciting as an instrument, and yet it has to be respecting tradition, and it has to have a headstock. So there are so many strange contradictions built into the community. Ola was great because obviously a lot of the artists that he works with are women, and he supports bringing the non-gender locked notion of what a guitar player is into the guitars that he's building and supporting his instruments, which is great. But the other thing that I wanted to connect back to in this context is the idea of what makes an instrument good. There's so much of a conservatism around what's a good instrument. I remember reading a quote from, I think, Marcus Reuter, who's a touch guitar player, who also builds them, I guess. And his comment was something like, if it's a guitar you want to play, it's a good guitar. But if it hurts you, it's a bad guitar. But sometimes there are guitars that you really want to play, but they hurt you also. And in a funny way, I feel like this can connect back to the taking care of an instrument that already exists, as well as building a new instrument that doesn't exist yet. But I'm really curious if you folks could talk a little bit about this idea of what constitutes a good instrument. What's an instrument you have to bring into existence, that you really want to bring into existence? Is it important that it doesn't hurt someone? Or maybe it has to hurt them a little bit, because that's the only way you can really get it to make a good sound. And then if the instrument actually does hurt someone and they bring it to you and they say, please help me set this up. It kind of hurts me, which I've done. I've brought my guitars to people and I've said, help me, this is hurting me, I need help. How do you react to that? Is it maybe it needs to hurt you a little bit, or no, we're going to make it? So that's a very long kind of question.
I like so many things you just said. Yeah, that was interesting to hear you talk about basically the basic patriarchy of the way that the sexualization of instruments is set up. It's incredibly conservative, it's restrictive, it's patriarchal, right? And yes, we have that. And I didn't get a chance to respond to that question, talking about like how people in the industry have responded to me as a young woman and as a luthier. And personally, 201, it's been awesome. But I did a couple videos for the StuMac repair catalog where you demonstrate something. And most people's main reaction is still, wow, that's a girl. Not like, did you use N-butyl solvent with a sable brush? Or how, it's like, she's a girl. So there is that. And many of them you wouldn't want, like, your dad to read. You know what I mean? Like, people get inappropriate, but also the internet is sort of a dumping ground for things like that. Anyway, yeah, right. So it's never not on the table. It's always part of the conversation. So I actually feel like doing panels like this, even if I got up and just didn't want to talk about gender at all I wanted to talk about was headstock shape. Being visible. Like, this is another way that luthiers look. This is another identity that luthiers have, and that's a real thing. But you were talking about guitars and hurting you. And it's interesting to think, like, yeah, right. So, like, I guess I could interpret that to mean, like, are all guitars super easy to play? And I think that every record you ever loved that was made before, I don't know, every old record you ever loved, if they're old enough, they didn't have humbuckers, you know what I mean? They didn't have perfect intonation, straight saddle guitars aren't going to intonate up the neck. You're going to be able to hear it. Guitars don't really ever intonate perfectly anyway, no matter who you are or what you're doing. This modern notion that everything has to be exactly perfect, I kind of rub up against a little bit. I think part of the creative process is dealing with real life, is dealing with imperfect situations. And yeah, a guitar, like, if you're playing, say you're playing a dreadnought and you want to play with a heavy pick and you want that dreadnought sound, so you say you're playing like a D28, right, and you really would like to have some projection, some depth, and some warmth and some support. You can't have super low action. I'm so sorry. You can't have it. And people want it. And those are people that I roll my eyes inwardly, and then I very patiently explain the way that things work. And they get it or they don't. There's always somebody at Guitar Center who will try. Then, I don't know, whatever. Then they'll bring it to me, and I'll have to charge them some money to fix that. But no, that's part of the job, is breaking it to people that you can't have everything.
Right.
Want to say anything about that?
Well, as like my background in industrial design, ergonomy was always in my thoughts, like when I was designing a chair, or even how to relamp a reflector, like without tools on top of a ladder. You have to think about how it will be handheld, and so so I will think about how it's going to feel in the hands as I build it. I definitely take that into account, because I've always did even before guitars were in my life.
Yeah, it seems like what makes a good guitar is kind of all relative, right? It's up to the individual, and I think when it comes to the headstock, it's like, okay, well, if I don't remember his name, but he makes one of those guitars and multiple people want it, he might make 5 more and so on. But I don't think that anyone can really say a good guitar is this, and this. A good guitar might be something that only plays one string, but that's what one person wants, and that's what is good to them. So that, I'm constantly also having a conversation with myself of what are things set up to be good for everyone, because that's how we know how to approach things, right? One thing exists for everyone, when really it's, things exist how we want them to exist, and we create them. So, yeah.
One size fit all is only a recent thing. It's been since the industrial era. It never was that way. So, and that applies to instrument as much as for any other thing. Yeah.
True.
Just touching on that conservatism in the guitar design sphere, there's been so much more evolution with guitars and what is acceptable design-wise than in the violin world. It is so conservative. It's absurd. People want the Stradivarius that has like horse poop rubbed in a specific spot and is worn away with varnish in this other specific spot. They want it to look exactly like that. They don't, I mean, hopefully it would sound good being a replica, but, you know, it's so rigid.
Yeah,
Even for materials.
Even for materials.
I can use rosewood for a fingerboard.
Yeah.
On a violin, that
No,
would be
you-
such a big no-no.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, and I don't know, fortunately, my building practices are just on the weekends and just, you know, by commission, and I have a lot more artistic license. You know, I carve weird animal heads in my scrolls, and I, you know, use weird wood, and that's fine for me, but if I really was trying to make a living selling those violins and get a name, it would be very challenging. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your experience and all of your advice. That was really great.
Thank you.